Hey gang, Randy here from Break and Run Billiards. This is our first video in this series, and we're going to talk about the cue ball. We're not going to get really deep into cue ball at this time. I want everybody to kind of walk before they can run, so to speak. And there's some things we have to know about the cue ball before we actually get into talking about what's going to happen if we stroke correctly and if we hit the ball on one side or the other. So we're going to go over some basics of the cue ball. And so I have 4 cue balls sitting out here. I got the polka dot ball that you see in a lot of matches. I have this ball, which is a training ball. It has 4 dots and 4 slashes on there, and then one for the center of the ball. But these balls should all be the same size, 2 1/4 inches. The cue ball is the same size as all the other balls on the table, which is 2 1/4 inches. However, there are some differences. If you have a ball that, well, let's say if you go to a bar with a coin-operated table, that ball is going to be a slightly different size. And not all manufacturers are very close on their tolerances, and also if the balls are really old, that cue ball is used every single time, and when it breaks and it hits with all that force, it actually compresses and it actually can get smaller with time. So like I said, we saw those 2 balls. This ball here was given to me, and this is probably 60-70 years old. I don't know where it came from. My father-in-law picked that up at a yard sale somewhere years ago. This one is the Aramith ball that came with my set. Now, if these are all the same size, I should be able to set this right on top, and they all should move. And we notice those middle 2 don't move. They are approximately 1/8 of an inch smaller than the other 2. Just to give you an idea that not all cue balls are made equal. But they all play the same. Even if they are a little bit smaller, the rules still apply. And the main rule we want to get through today is center ball. And if we know where center ball is, doesn't matter what size this cue ball is, it's going to act the same way. So when I talk about center ball, what am I really talking about? Center ball is that point that's halfway from the bottom of the ball to the top, so approximately 1 1/8 inches up. But it also means that it's 1 1/8 inches from either side. How do we find that? Well, the easiest way, take my cue right here, is when we aim, if we get down on this ball and look as low as we can, that ball is sitting on that felt, and it's round, so the very smallest part of that ball is on the bottom of that felt, and so that is the bottom of the ball. So there's our side to side. So we find that here, and we can go up and we can go down, up and down. And we are on the center of the vertical axis. But the next question is, how do we find side to side we just found side to side. How do we find vertically if we're too high or low? We want to be 1 1/8 inches off of the table. Well, it's a little bit more difficult, but to give you an idea where this is, take a piece of chalk. It could be the octagon chalk or the square chalk. Both of those are exactly 1 inch. And if we set that on the table and put our cue stick on there, our cue sticks are tipped. If it's 13 millimeters, it is approximately 1/2 inch in diameter. If it's a 12 millimeter, it's a little less than 1/2 inch. So we'll use 1/2 inch as our basis here. If we have a 1 inch piece of chalk and we take half of that 1/2 inch, that's a 1/4 inch, sitting on this chalk we are 1 1/4 inches above the felt. So we're 1/8 of an inch off the center. So that's pretty close. So we can look at this and get a good idea where center ball is. This is going to take a little bit of practice to understand it, and I'll guarantee you that 80% of the players out there think center ball is higher than what it actually is. I've taken a piece of chalk and people will be aiming and say, "I'll tell me that's center ball," and I can pass this chalk underneath there without it hitting the stick. So I know they're too high. So that's how we find center ball. You practice that, you get used to seeing where that is. Now we take this, we're going to put this on the foot spot. So let's talk about that in a minute. Why is it important to know where center ball is? Well, like I was mentioning, this tip on this stick, and this particular one is 12.25 millimeters. Most sticks, when we get them, they're 13. And like I said, one's a little bit more than a 1/2 inch, one's a little bit less. So just using a 1/2 inch as a basis, when we hit this ball, a 1/4 inch of that tip is all that comes in contact with the cue ball. 1/4 inch. That means that one tip of English, and that term you'll hear on pool nights or at the bar or in the pool hall, one tip of English is 1/4 inch. That's nothing. It's very little. When I first started playing pool, somebody would tell me, "Oh, put a tip of English on that," and I would look and say, "Oh, I got a 1/2 inch tip. I'll go 1/2 inch." I was putting 2 tips of English, twice as much English as I needed when people were telling me that, because nobody told me that a tip of English was only a 1/4 inch. I suspect they don't even know that. So when I look at this ball and I say, okay, this is center ball, I know if I hit a 1/4 inch to the right or a 1/4 inch to the left, I am going to put a tip of English. Now, does that matter? Yeah, it does. If I hit this straight down the line, I am on the foot spot here. If I hit down this line and hit that center diamond on the other side of the table with one tip of English, I will hit this first diamond over here. If I put 2 tips, 1/2 inch, and I hit that center diamond on that side, it's going into this pocket or this pocket. So it makes a big difference. We're not talking a large amount, and most amateurs have a hard time hitting within a 1/4 inch of center ball. So in most shots, we're putting English on those balls. And I know in games where I get a little bit caught up and I'm not thinking right, I'll hit a ball and I'll say, wow, that had some English on it. And I'm going, I did not find center ball before I started that. I just made an assumption and hit that ball like I thought it should have been hit. We need to know where center ball is. And for this particular video, we are going to work primarily just with center ball. So the next thing we need to know about the cue ball. There is only 3 things that you can do to this cue ball. And that sounds simple, right? The angle that we hit this, we can hit it high all the way down to level where it's off of the rail. If we hit this at the center ball in relationship to the stick, we are driving that cue ball into the slate and it's going to bounce. if we come down and hit that a little bit lower, it'll bounce, but it's going to go farther. The higher is, the higher the jump. The lower hit, the lower the jump, but the farther it will go. We hit a level cue, and that ball is just going to skid right across the felt. Have you ever been in the pool hall and somebody gets over here to break and they wind up and they hit that ball and that crack of the rack is just beautiful, it's just loud, the balls go all over the table and the cue ball flies off the table? That is because when this person hits this ball, they are bringing their stick up to get that power, get their shoulder into it, and when they hit it, they're driving that cue ball into the table, and it is hopping to that rack, and if it hits that rack while it's in the air, it goes off the table. So that's the first thing we can do with the cue ball, is the angle we hit this. The second thing we kind of got into a little bit when we were talking about tips of English. We can hit this off center and cause that ball to spin one way or the other. And like I was mentioning, you come off the rail, it's going to go whatever way you're setting off your spin. The third thing is how hard we hit this, the speed of which we send this cue ball on the table. We hit it soft and it stops down there. We hit it a little harder, it goes down and comes back. We hit this ball really hard, it might go down and back twice. Now, those three things, when you add them together, create an infinite amount of problems. Because if I hit this high and I hit this off to the side, I can put spin on and jump the ball. And I have seen Torlori hit the ball and actually curve it in the air and come down and to make a shot. I'm going, wow. And I have hit jump shots when I was first learning how to do that, and I would watch them curve in the air. They started out right and they would miss the ball I'm jumping it because I was not hitting them correctly so that they went straight. Now also, you'll find that some people have what they call a swerve, or it's kind of a small masse. If I hit down on this ball on one side or the other, I will put spin on it and it will spin in a direction, and that'll catch on the felt and cause that ball to curve while it's on the table. And the harder you hit that, the further down the table that it actually curves. So those are all things that can happen if we are not stroking the correct way. Those are all nice tools to have in your tool bag, but we don't want to inadvertently hit those. So we start out with center ball, and we are going to do center ball until we're comfortable with it, and then we're going to learn maybe how to back up the ball a little bit or make the ball roll forward a little bit more. And as we finish through all our stroke stuff, we'll get into a little bit more on the cue ball and actually talk about spin and stuff. So the three things we can do to the cue ball: we can shoot it at an angle, we can shoot it with spin, or we can shoot it with speed. Now the other thing we have to remember is that when we're stroking the ball in a normal ball, we have to be careful to make sure we aren't putting any of those things in there that we don't want. For instance, angle is going to create, if we hit this below the center and hit through the ball, we're going to put backspin on that ball that we might not want. So we want to hit this ball so that we have the least amount of variables. We want to eliminate all the variables in our stroke so that we can be consistent with every stroke. There's probably 20 things that goes on in our stroke when we're up at the table. any one of those can create a mess. You can miss the ball, or you can hit the cue ball and it ends up behind something else. We have to know what's going on with the cue ball. So we're going to talk about the simplest part of the stroke is that when we hit this cue ball, we want this cue to be level. We're going to take angle out of the game at this point. So we want this stick to ride on the rail, or as close to the rail as we can get it. When we hit the center ball with a level cue, this ball will slide for a period of time, and then friction will cause it to start rolling forward, and what they call that is rolling English, or just natural English. It's not over rolling like you would have if you put topspin on it, but it'll roll just at a normal rate until it stops. We keep a level cue. We can still do the things in the future where we put spin on there, but we're going to take angle out of the equation at this point. So how do we test for this? All right. When I set this up, I can look at this ball and I can say, all right, I have my marks all lined up on center ball. That's all center ball. Now I'll take my piece of chalk and I'll set that here, and I have the spot that I think I want to hit on this training ball, and I'll set my cue in there, and I'm looking, I'm saying, hey, I've got center ball right there. I am set, so I know I have center ball. This is part of our checks and balances. Now, after we get through the stroke, this will become a little bit more apparent on what's going on, but when we get ready to stroke this, you are going to shoot this ball from this spot at that far diamond and come back and hit the end of your stick. So when I hit this, I am going to come through here, come through all the way and leave my stick on the table. And that ball missed the head of my stick by about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch. Remember what we said. 1/4 inch put you 1 diamond away. I ended up about 1/4 diamond away, which meant that I was 1/4 of an inch off center. That's nothing. And if you can do better than that, perfect. But if you can stay within 1/8 of an inch of center ball, you are going to be far ahead of most everybody else that's playing pool. We need this exactness as we go through, because we're going to take the variables out of our game. So that's our primer that we're going to use. 3 things you can do to a pool ball: the angle, the spin, and the speed that we hit it. We want to hit the cue ball with a level cue, because that's going to take angle out of our equation. We're going to hit center ball because that's going to take spin out of the equation. So all we're going to deal with is speed. The only variable we got to deal with is speed with the cue ball. As we get better with this, we'll start talking about the other things, and we will bring that into the equation. So that's the cue ball primer. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video. We're going to talk briefly about pool sticks and the table, and then we're going to get into the stroke. All right. Thank you for watching. This is Randy from Breaking